national youth development. My name is John Vianny Ayebare. I'll be hosting this talk this evening. And this evening we are discussing the topic, the legal position on youth developments in Uganda. This week we've had a number of developments, including the Geneva Speech, which was given by the leader of the National Unity Platform, Robert, in which he addressed the Geneva Summit on Human Rights. We've also had other developments. Yesterday, the people had organized prayers for the incarcerated retired Dr. Besigye. We are told to go back home. There have been many opinions on that aspect, but today we have lawyers to help us understand these aspects. We also have the issue of freedom of press. To what extent can we say the press in Uganda is free? But also, we'll be touching on the position of the Speaker of Parliament, it having generated a number of issues, especially those who are interested in contesting for that very position. The lawyers will help us understand the eligibility and other issues appertaining thereto. The checkpoint always comes to you every Tuesday, 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. And this evening, I'm blessed to have an able panel. Starting from my far left, I have Kibirige Araphat. He's a lawyer. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you very much, sir.
Okay, this is your first time to appear. We're happy to have you around.
I'm so blessed to be on this particular program.
Thank you very much. Next, I have Obed Nankunda. He's a lawyer and he has been here on several occasions. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear listeners and viewers all over the world, I'm happy to be here and I believe you are going to learn a lot from us. Thank you.
Next, I have Tusime Loy Tracy. She's a lawyer and she has been here on the checkpoint previously, and we are very happy to have you once again.
I'm glad to be here.
Thank you very much. Now it is time to kick in, and I want to start with Obed to make us understand the aspect of the Geneva Speech, which was made by His Excellency, they call him His Excellency, those in the National Unity Platform, Robert Kyagulanyi. What did you make of that speech?
Well, His Excellency, as you've also referred to him, Robert Kyagulanyi, having been one of the presidential aspirants for this last elections that we had in Uganda, and I would want to say having failed to succeed, has a right, of course, to begin with, how he left the country to go to Geneva, whether in by lawful means, having passed through lawful, whether he passed through porous borders or passed through the airport, whatever it is, we would want to think, first of all, he has a right of movement as an individual. Now, back to his statement that he made, that could be his personal statement. And he's entitled to his own statement as an individual, depending on whether he's being persecuted in Uganda or not. And having been the leader, having been the president, a presidential aspirant from the side of National Unity Platform, he, I don't want to comment much about his statement and his prayers in the Geneva. But I would want to say that whatever he said it as an individual, not necessarily on behalf of Uganda.
Thank you very much. Araphat, he said it as an individual. First of all, what does the Geneva Summit do? Does it create any impact? I mean, his speech, does it have any legal importance?
Okay, well, when we need to first look at one thing. His Excellency Robert Kyagulanyi Ssentamu, being one of the political leader of the National Unity Platform, we need to understand one thing, and this is the problem we are having as the government. Probably when someone is a leader of opposition, first of all, he has that duty as a leader. And as a matter of fact, Lubaga Cathedral has the right to speak, first of all. Given the fact is the Geneva Speech, of course, this opened another side of the government, NRM. Of course, they will say it's inciting violence, which I totally disagree with, because he has that right to speak as a political leader. Because when you think of maybe his statement inciting violence to the people, I mean, there is nothing unlawful he has done. He's just speaking what is happening. His family has been exiled. You know, that trauma. I think there is nothing wrong with his statement.
Thank you very much. So Tracy, the position is that there is nothing wrong with that statement. Could you take us to what extent is a person said to have done something wrong when he's addressing an international summit like that? What does the law say? Do we have a leeway that we can go to Geneva, or we address them virtually like Robert Kyagulanyi did, and we say whatever we want, because we have a right to say what we want to say?
Thank you very much, Vianny. So, since Kyagulanyi is a citizen of Uganda, he does have a right to speech. It's provided for in the Constitution under Article 29. And I had a chance to listen to his speech, and he was talking about his journey, how the elections have been since the first election when he contested, this one, what his family has been through. And on a legal basis, there is really nothing wrong with him going out and speaking what has happened to him. Whether we agree with him or not, politically, he has his right to speech. Then on that part of, is he inciting violence? On that part, I think that's a question of fact. Have we seen any violence come up yet?
Okay, so to incite would mean that there must be some violence, to say he incited violence?
Yes, I've not seen any evidence to that.
To show that there is violence.
That allegation.
Obed, do you want to agree?
Not necessarily agree with what she says, but still,
to bring it to context, I saw the minister saying that Kyagulanyi should be charged with treason for what he said in Geneva. As a lawyer, would you support the charge of treason?
not necessarily. That was his own statement as an individual. I don't want to say that he said it on behalf of the entire country or the government. But what I can say is that Mr. Kyagulanyi, or His Excellency Kyagulanyi, as an individual, could have had his own issues. And I think he went with some other person, not necessarily him alone. And trying to express, of course, his dissatisfaction with the way human rights are being abused in Uganda. Maybe to begin with, Mr. Moderator, when we are protecting human rights in Uganda, do we protect them on anyone's behalf? In other words, I would want to think that human rights are inborn, that they are inherent, that protection of the human rights is a duty to anybody, everybody. So in other words, I don't want to be, I would want to categorize it like, as per Mr. Kyagulanyi's statement, and his call for the European Union to put sanctions against Uganda, against the president and his son, it's like he's in so doing, like when you're protecting human rights, you're protecting them on somebody's behalf. That once you don't do them, then you run to that person and say, this person has failed to protect human rights. Can you put sanctions against him? Yet human rights are supposed to be protected no matter where you're going to report. You get my point?
On reporting, that's why there are avenues for people to run to where there are violations. Because the state is a stronger institution that has weapons of coercion. So that's why we have institutions, which means it was envisaged that there could be violations, even when human rights are universal. So why are you saying that there is no need for one to watch the government, because the government anyway has to protect the rights because they are universal and inherent?
Yes, like I've said, the human rights are inherent, they're universal. We have ratified to a number of conventions and treaties that all talk about human rights. And well, I said it, of course, in trying to react to his act of going to the European Union and asking them, please, because the government of Yoweri Kaguta Museveni, under his leadership and his son, they have violated human rights. Please, can you put sanctions against them? It's like, according to me and my own observation, and it's not an observation of everybody, the human rights as if they are being protected on somebody's behalf. Like, and if you don't protect them, someone will run and tell somebody else, look, this man has refused to. Yet I've said these are universal, that human rights, that the way they are protected here in Uganda, the way they are protected in Rwanda, the way they are protected in Bangladesh, the way they are protected everywhere elsewhere in the world. That what I don't want to happen here on me, I also don't want it to happen on me even when I go to another country. Likewise, whoever is in a certain country and wants to come to Uganda, his or her rights should be protected. And thus, therefore, by him running to Geneva and telling, and making his prayers, please do the following things because so and so, and all individuals have failed to do so, is what is my concern. If I may have tried to reply very well your question.
Thank you. Araphat, are there no institutions in Uganda that can address human rights violations? Why should we appeal to the Europeans to put sanctions on us?
That is interesting, because let me tell you one thing. The problem we have here is that literally we might not have that freedom as we citizens. And that's why you're looking at Lubaga Cathedral, I'm going to Geneva. Because here you don't have that right to speak. We need also to look at what is the intention of this Geneva, is to look at the relationship, looking at the welfare of the citizens, how are they treated. So that's when Geneva comes into play. So here in Uganda, fine, we might have that freedom, but it is that it is on paper, but in practice, it is not there.
Let me go to one of the aspects he said, that
His family has gone to exile. Tracy, what qualifies, or what legal justification can encourage one to go into exile?
Going into exile, in case you're not in good terms with the government, I would encourage you to go to exile. That is basing on history, the history that we have seen, not only in this country.
So when you are not in good terms, you go to exile. When you're not in good terms with a government, you go into exile.
Yes.
And from a position, this cuts across in all governments across the world. But the question I want to understand is there a legal justification? For example, what amounts to good terms and bad terms in law, to the extent that one has to go into exile?
In the law was made by people for a system, I would say a perfect system, but we are imperfect people. And you do not expect, I would be shocked if we find our laws followed to the letter. I personally would be shocked. But the government is headed by a person. And people can have egos, power can get to you. Yes, so that's what I can say.
Obed, it appears that from what I gather from Tracy's submission, is that where systems don't work and you feel you are not protected, you run to exile. Is there a legal justification to have the family of Robert Kyagulanyi go into exile?
Yeah, it is, because one, we have freedom of movement, which is provided for in the Constitution, and international laws provide for that very space where one is free to move, even from his own country, even from their own country. You're supposed you can leave and go to another country, as long as you think your life is at a threat, or you are being persecuted, either politically, you're being persecuted, you are free to move. There is freedom of movement. Though actually international laws call for, in case you want to return, there must be limited lawful restrictions. Don't so much restrict, because this person is still remains a citizen of Uganda, even when he goes. And even if the person goes out of this country and denounces his citizenship, and he has denounced his citizenship not freely, in other words, not voluntarily, but because of other circumstances, someone has denounced his citizenship, the law requires that once this person returns, and actually he or she still remains a citizen of Uganda, even when upon return, he's supposed to be welcome. Though, of course, like I've said, under limited lawful restrictions, as long as his return does not affect the internal, the security of the country, it's not against public order, that person can still come back to Uganda and enjoys his freedom as a Ugandan. So the justification of their movement, they are free to move. Even yourself, you are free to move out of the country, as long as you think you can still move like any other person and apply for visa, you go to another country. Or you can escape, just like the way other people have gone out of this country. But by escaping, wherever you go, you make sure that you follow the laws of that very country, because not every country will have laws that will help you, will allow you to seek asylum in their country. And if those countries allow, of course, most of them have ratified to the UN Convention. So meaning they will still allow you to their country. So the justification about their movement, they are free to move as long as they think their lives are being threatened.
Thank you very much. I want to go to another segment on the aspect of the freedom of press. The press is called the fourth estate to the extent that they should be able to provide the meaning behind the headlines. So their freedom is very important in a democracy. So I want to go to Araphat to highlight for us what entails freedom of press.
Thank you, Mr. Vianny. Freedom of press is all about publication. You publish, you speak out what you feel is right. However, that freedom of expression it is limited. Not everything that you have to talk about it. In a democratic society, freedom of expression, you need to talk about what is transpiring. You need to critique what is really happening in the nation. When it comes to Uganda, freedom of expression, it is there because every person speaks out what he feels like. We are seeing so many big personnels communicating out what they feel it is supposed to be done. However, to some extent, when you talk about something, you end up running. For example, you can talk about Isaac Semakad expressing out what you feel. You cannot, at the end of the day, eat. You have to run. So, freedom of expression is all about expressing out what you feel is wrong, what you feel is right in that particular way.
Thank you. To see, picking from his submission, I want you to tell me whether you agree whether that is freedom of press, its legal justification, and when can we say a press is, is free or it is patriotic? Recently, we've seen an exchange between the Chief of Defense Forces, the CDF, and the Daily Monitor and NTV. The issue is that they are becoming unpatriotic. So what's the distinction
between press?
Between a press being free and a press being patriotic in nature?
A press patriotism, if I could put it in simple terms, is love for the country, right? So to have a free press is to have a patriotic press. That's how I would put it. But however, you cannot, the instances maybe where we can say that freedom of press should be limited can be in a situation of security. Like, let me say you cannot go and start publishing how the UPDF is making its how they are deploying soldiers maybe in Somalia, their tactics. That one is off limits. But however, if the press is bringing truth to the public, I do not see where you're going to say it's limiting patriotism, because even if we were to go and do defamation, one of the defenses in defamation is what the person actually said is true. So if what the press is saying is true, where is the unpatriotism? Because we as a nation, I personally, as a Ugandan, would love to watch news and get truth, not anything less than that.
Now the issue is going to be truth. Well, Obed, what amounts to truth in press and in law? She highlighted an aspect of defamation. Because if a press reports what is not true, we say it is defamation. Help us to clearly understand the role of the press in ensuring that they are not seditious, the content is true, like she said, and it is not defamatory. In other words, the content is patriotic.
Okay. It will begin with, let's start with the freedom of press, and which is, of course, a right which is enjoyed by Ugandans. And under freedom of press, one, as a media center, you are free to collect your own information, you broadcast it or disseminate it. First of all, you look at it and you are able to edit it where necessary, and then disseminate it by broadcasting freely without any other interference. which of course Uganda has been enjoying. Now, when talking about enjoying that right, it also begins with the right to also establish a number of radio stations, a number of TVs, that you are not restricted to either one television or to one radio station. That means even today, you, Mr. Vianny, if you have the capacity and you can meet all the requirements of UCC, you can start up your own radio station or radio or a television. So you are free and you have freedom to collect your own news, edit them where necessary, and broadcast them. Now, when it comes to the other patriotic press, I would want to call it the mouthpiece of the government. I am tempted to think, I'm tempted to even use UBC as a mouthpiece of the government or a patriotic media. Now, when it comes to patriotic media, you prioritize matters of national interest, you prioritize national unity. In other words, you look at matters that will be broadcasted that will sell the image of the country elsewhere. Notwithstanding these other issues that will be there, but of course they may not be put at the front because you really need to paint a very good picture of your country to the entire world.
So now the issue, what I want to understand
now,
is...
when it comes to the other free press, the freedom of press and where there is free press.
Before you go there, I wanted to understand, painting a picture, a good picture of the government, I wanted to understand, is it that other media stations are not doing that? And also, is it about painting a good picture or reporting the truth?
Okay, well, I get what you are saying. Why I used it as a PRO, the mouthpiece of the country. Like any other institution, you don't expect a PRO or the PRO to speak ill against its own institution. In other words, the person who is there to speak on behalf of an institution will talk always what is good to be heard.
But also, if we don't know the other side, then that means as a government we cannot improve.
So, likewise, that's why I told you I was still explaining what is patriotic and what is free press. Mm-hmm. With the free press, it entails even criticism. You criticize the government. You criticize what is being done. Support what is good and criticize what is bad. But you should also not prioritize in only criticism. Like, it shouldn't be seen every time you are criticizing. That's why even we say even opposition in parliament, you come to parliament on the side of opposition, but you should not be a person who should oppose everything to the extent that you should even oppose the formation of parliament. In other words, you are from opposition, but don't oppose everything. So in other words, even when there is freedom of press, like I've said, you are free to collect your own news. You can have your news broadcasted without being censored by either government or any other agent of the government. But then it should not become monotonous that you are fond of only criticizing every minute, every hour. It is okay. It puts the government at the point where it unveils what is in the government that is not good. But then it should not be your media that should always be every time broadcasting what is bad, what is bad. Much as we have freedom of press, yes, there is freedom. And that's why I told you that even freedom of press starts from even you being allowed to start up your own radio station or your own television. Otherwise, as the government would have said, let us only remain with UBC. Let us only remain with UBC radio, and you will not have any other radio. So when you remain with only UBC, which is a patriotic TV or patriotic radio, it will only paint only the good picture, and you will never see anything, even where maybe some human rights are being abused by the government agencies, you will not see it. And I'm not saying that UBC can also not broadcast the same, but to a lesser extent.
Thank you. Araphat, you want to add something? Yes. And I want you to tell us whether, from your analysis, juxtaposing the law and the reality, whether freedom of press, we can say, yes, we have it in Uganda, like that is highlighting.
Okay. Let me first inform our viewers that because we need to understand this. Freedom, we need to understand press and patriotic. So the way I understand it is media and the state. We have U24, it's broadcasting. We have the state, which is the watchdog. You understand? The press and the patriotic. So the media and the state, whatever you broadcast on the station, it has to be controlled. Not everything that you feel like you have to broadcast it out. That's why we see so many TV stations, so many programs that are stopped by UCC because it is the controller. You can't just wake up in the morning, think of something, utter it out when it is controversial to the government. Understand?
Are you sure?
Because everything we express.
Right now, you've just given him an opinion that Kyagulanyi is free to give a speech against the government. Isn't that controversial to the government? This program has not yet been stopped.
But what we need to know is one thing. Fine, you have that freedom of speech. What kind of information are you transferring to the nation? Is it really a threat? You know? So that's when the government comes in. You can't just speak whatever you want because this government is controlled.
Okay.
Despite the fact.
I don't know when you say you can't speak whatever you want. Perhaps if
because
you say,
you know what is happening.
If you say,
you know what is happening. If you're saying you're going to speak out,
what does the law say?
You have to be very sure of what you're speaking out. The law is that you have the right to speak whatever you want. Yes, but as I told you, there's that watchdog behind the curtains. You know, despite the fact you have that right, you have to also limit yourself.
The right, Tracy, the right to freedom of press is not absolute. So to what extent can the government intervene, the regulator, like UCC, intervene to ensure that the press does not go beyond?
What do you mean by go beyond?
Beyond what is permissible. Because, like I've said, the right is not absolute.
The right not being absolute, UCC should intervene where someone's freedom of press is prejudicing another person. So, let's take up the example of NTV and Daily Monitor. How many people have come up and said, these television stations are what? They are disturbing us in a certain way. Actually, see, it's only the government that is quite irritated. CDF, that's quite irritated by them. Otherwise, I don't see anything wrong with those two televisions, with NTV and Daily Monitor.
But a right to freedom of press is limited. If we could borrow from Charles Onyango Bo and another, that's Andrew Mwenda versus the Attorney General. The court has looked at this right and said, you cannot say everything and anything. So do you agree with Tracy to that extent of limitation?
I would want to maybe come to my own version or opinion that, of course, building from what you are saying, that the right of press is not necessarily absolute. You have a right to, but it's not necessarily absolute, in a sense that it is subject to limitations. Now, even when these media centers are beginning, they go through all the necessary requirements to make sure that they are lawfully allowed to operate in Uganda. And among them, restrictions are given to them. Please don't do this. Please don't go beyond this. When you're going to broadcast this. Actually, I've also been told, to some extent, there are people who are attached to these media centers from the side of the government, purposely to look at what is being, what has been collected, what are they going to broadcast.
Isn't that press censorship?
It would be called censorship in a sense, but then if you go back and say that there is no freedom of press, whereby you've cited Daily Monitor and NTV, are they still operational or they have been closed? They are still operational. That means there is already freedom of press, because if there was no freedom of press, they should even have closed as early as yesterday, depending on your own assertion of saying that they are fond of broadcasting only the dirt of the government. Even when I've said that there are people...
I didn't say so because I don't know whether they only broadcast one side.
Maybe, but there must be a reason why they are specifically talking about the NTV and Daily Monitor, these publications. There must be a reason why they have talked about specifically the two media. But what I'm trying to mean is that the right is there, but it is not absolute. And you do not, it's like when somebody says that you have a right to own property, but you use that very property in accordance with other laws in force. So you can't say, I have my property and I can do anything with it. Other laws will come and touch you. So in other words, even then when the law has allowed you, when the government says, no, you are free to broadcast any news that you have, but then you must limit yourself to some limitations. Don't go beyond. Now, the going beyond is what calls for UCC. The going beyond is what calls for the state operatives to come in and say, but please, you are doing this one beyond the limitation. In other words, I'm trying to show you that freedom of press is there in Uganda. Now, I have one challenge. We have the law. We have the supreme law, which is the Constitution. The very Constitution provides for freedom of press, freedom of speech. Some people, even when they are still within Uganda, before even they escape, you find them saying that we don't have freedom of speech. And somebody is already either on TV or is on a public radio and saying we don't have freedom of speech. I mean, where are you speaking from? I think you are speaking from Uganda, you are speaking from a radio station or TV or on a political line. You're speaking from Uganda, not outside Uganda.
Maybe because the conditions to address such a rally have been made very difficult.
They may not necessarily have been made difficult, because if they had been made difficult, you should even not have had that chance of even saying it, that there's no freedom. Because it's like when somebody says, how do you stay silent? And then you also mention silence. That means you're already not staying silent. So in other words, you can't say you are being restricted from speaking, even when you are now speaking and from the same country.
Okay, thank you. I want to go to the aspect of worship, freedom of worship. And before I come to Kibirige, because I want him to give us the nexus between freedom of worship and politics. Tracy, help us understand what entails freedom of worship.
Freedom of worship is you get to practice your religion as a Ugandan. If you're a Muslim, you can go to the mosque, you can pray 5 times a day. If you're a Christian, born again, Catholic, you're free to practice your religion the way your religion calls for you to practice it.
Uganda's situation, how would you give it a credit that that right is well protected?
In regards to that?
In general terms, because I see people starting churches, others using churches to steal people, you know. There are some religious leaders who have been convicted of crimes like murdering people and sacrificing others. So to what extent do you have that right of freedom of press
freedom of religion, freedom of worship in Uganda?
I would say in Uganda, the freedom of religion is respected. It's respected and followed by the government. I would say that.
Okay, thank you. So Kibirige, what's the nexus between freedom of worship and politics? How do those interact?
Freedom of worship and politics. Okay. Worship is going to is praising. You praise. You believe in what your soul is. It is all about religion. What kind of religion are you transferring? So, as citizens of Uganda, the constitution is very clear. And we are saying every individual has a right to worship. When it comes to politics, let me give an example of Besigye. When the Catholic, the Archbishop tried to make, how can I state it? When the Archbishop tried to, yesterday, was it yesterday?
Yes, to hold the prayers
Yes,
for
Yes.
Dr. Besigye.
The prayers for Dr. Besigye. When it comes to politics, we are looking at the president saying, no, we are not going to allow that mass to occur. There is something behind that. We think when you are in church, or when Paul Kawangso Mogerere is in the mass, there's a threat as the government. That's when politics comes in. Despite the fact we have that right to worship. Now, what are we going to show to the nation? So that's why we are saying, let this mass stop, because there is that threat that would come on board on the political side. We are seeing our brother is still incarcerated in Luzira. So there is that political thing that is happening.
Thank you. I have some comments coming through. Frank Nation is watching, and he was saying that, I think he sent a comment earlier on saying that journalism is a profession. Yeah, that's true. It's a profession, and everybody has a right to practice his profession. Frank Nation also is saying reporting injustices in Uganda is not a crime. Yeah, it is not. I think we agree. Reporting injustice is not a crime. We have Nasu Nasara is watching and following. He sends regards to the panel and to Araphat. So, Obed, in 1 minute, I wanted you to comment on the interaction between religion and politics.
Okay, well, religion and politics. I would say, first of all, to begin with, Uganda is a secular state. In other words, we don't have any state religion, and we have freedom of worship, which is, I think, under Article 29 of the Constitution. And the same right entails, one, freedom of worshipping from any religion. You are free even to change religion. You have a freedom from being discriminated according to religion. Someone should not say, you are not going to be part of us because you are not a Muslim. You're not going to be part of us because you're not a Christian. So in other words, the freedom of worship entails that you are free to manifest to belong to a religion. Now, it means even if today you begin your own religion, you'd still be allowed as long as you get followers. So you are free to begin your religion, you are free to pray from anywhere that you want. However, even when you have this freedom, like any other freedom, it is also not absolute. You should also enjoy this freedom in accordance with the law. Now, we have laws governing this country, including public order management.
As you summarized, I gave you a minute.
Yes. Including the Public Order Management Act, which provides for public gatherings. So in other words, before you call for public gatherings, you must first of all ask for permission from the Inspector General of Police to allow you to do so. So I wanted to relate it to politics. Of course, many politicians have, of course, tried to rely on the religions. When you look at the past political parties that we used to have in Uganda, which were formed based on religions, like the UPC, DP, and all other parties of the past, which would be say, this is the party for the Catholics, this is the party for the Protestants, this is the party for maybe Kabaka, you get. But then what I'm trying to mean is that when you let the freedom of worship and politics, realize that much as you are free, it also depends on how you play your politics in relation to this religion.
Thank you very much. I am going to pick your last words, and I'm going to start with Araphat in 10 seconds, because I see time is not our best friend. Give us your final remarks, then we'll come to Obed and finally Tracy.
Thank you very much. What we need to, let me just use this opportunity as well to also, because when it comes to Islam, you have that right to worship. Islam teaches us very well that obey God, Allah, obey the Prophet, and those in authority. So now, if you have that right to worship, fine. Now, when it comes to politics, obey your leader. Obey your leader. So, since I'm given a few minutes, worshiping has to move in hand with politics as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Over to you, Obed. Your last remarks.
To me?
Just in 10 seconds, please.
Oh, okay. Dear listeners and viewers all over the world, thank you for listening to us. I would want to think what we have been discussing today has been of good help to the entire nation. Where we have not gone right, we ask you to forgive us, for God and my country.
Thank you. I don't know. Okay, over to you, Tracy.
So my last final remarks are in regards to religion, the fact that I believe that the Archbishop could just still go ahead and conduct those prayers because he has a right to do that. Yes, and thank you for having us. Have a blessed night.
Thank you very much. The Archbishop could have proceeded to have prayers. Now me, I'm proceeding to end this show. Thank you very much, our viewers. And the checkpoint always comes to you every Tuesday, 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. on U24 television, the National Youth Development. This Tuesday, we are discussing legal position and a number of weekly developments. And I had Kibirige Araphat, who is a lawyer. I had Obed Nankunda, a lawyer. And also to see me, Tracy Roy, also a lawyer. And me, I'm John Vianny Ayebare. I will see you next week on Tuesday at the same time. Coming up is U24 Cinema. Stay tuned and have a good night.